right. Thank you very much. We are going to hear two reports. First off, this morning we're hearing a report from the PAB chairperson. Blake Tipton is going to provide the report. So Blake, if you could come up to the microphone beside Adam there.
Thank you, Paul, and good morning. First of all, this is an interim report. I do apologize, but apparently our report, the final report, did not conform to the new format. So the finalized one will be to you within a week, but it'll be pretty well close to this one here. So please bear with me while I read it. The 24th session of the International Pacific Halibut Commission Processors Advisory Board was held January the 29th to 30th, 2019, with 16 companies members on the first day and 18 company members on the second day. There were 28 participants on Tuesday and 33 participants on Wednesday. The HANA president, Jesse Kopliger, called for nominations for position of the chairperson of the PAB until the opening of the next session in 2020. I was nominated and was seconded and elected as the chairperson by unanimous vote. I just might add that as the meetings are in Canada this year, it is tradition that we have a Canadian chairman and an American vice chairman. And then the nominations were called for a position of vice chairman of the PAB until the opening of the next session in 2020. And Jesse Kopliger from HANA was nominated, seconded, and elected as vice chairman, also on a unanimous vote. We also had many guests and want to thank Patrick DePoe of the Makah tribe and Steve Joyner of the Quinault tribe for going through the proposal on C1. Beth Conception of the Alaska Seafood Cooperative, Mark Fina of the United States Seafood, and Chris Woodley of the Groundfish Forum on halibut bycatch reductions, and Mike Petrus on his proposal for C2. We want to thank those people for coming to our meeting and enlightening us on their particular topics. The PAB recognizes that the expertise and generosity of the IPHC Secretariat staff in general was specifically Dr. Wilson, Ian Stewart, Alan Hicks, Steve Keith, and Laura Erickson for explaining details on the decision table, proposals, and other issues. We're also grateful for the assistance of Tracy and Ed Henry throughout the whole PAB meeting for guiding us through and the presentations and the help that they gave us. PAB recommends that the Commission adopt an opening date of Saturday, March the 23rd, 2019, and a closing date of Thursday, November the 7th, 2019. Both dates will become effective at noon local time. PAB notes that the final motion was passed by a vote of 14 in favor, 2 opposed, and 2 abstaining. The final vote was preceded by an earlier motion that was amended before being adopted and rescinded the next day. The final motion reflects concerns over the threat of another U.S. federal government shutdown and the U.S., which would affect the issuance of permits and the additional backlog of a 35-day shutdown it could cause. The Saturday opening favors marketing timing as well as the Boston Seafood Show and tides. The early November closure is appropriate given weather for the fleet's market timing and plant schedules, but also and it's not in here, but to allow the IPHC staff and to get ready for their stock assessment. I would add that that's not in here is that our initial motion was from the 13th of March to the 13th of November. And the vote on that was 8 in favor and 7 opposed. And PAB has always prided itself that we would come out on a consensus, and there was concern that brought up by our U.S. members, a few of the U.S. members, that March the 13th might be too early based on the possibility of not getting their licenses and quotas and permits. So we readdressed it. And the main reason is so that everybody was comfortable or became comfortable with our final season dates, because it's important for PAB to get as close to consensus as possible. The PAB recommends that the Commission support Proposal A1 titled to improve clarity and transparency of fishing limits in the IPHC fishing regulations, and PAB final vote was 17 in favor, nobody opposed, and 1 abstention. The PAB notes their motion to oppose Proposal A2 by unanimous vote and recommends that the Commission does not adopt fixed dates for either the opening or the closing of the Pacific halibut fishing season. PAB notes that market conditions change every year. Frozen inventory levels are different every year, and each processor species mix may change and make conforming to a fixed date impossible. PAB also notes that if the quota increases, there may be compelling reasons for longer season, so flexibility is both necessary and efficient when setting annual opening and closing dates. PAB also recommends adoption of Proposal A3, which would make minor amendments to the IPHC regulations. These revisions to the regulations would include updating and clarifying existing fishery regulations, reordering regulations for clarity and emphasis, and PAB's final vote on this item was unanimous. PAB recommends that the Commission adopt Proposal B1, Charter Management Measures and IPHC Regulatory Areas 2C and 3A, because these management measures are submitted by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game and NOAA Fisheries based on last year's performance and this year's catch limits. PAB's vote was 18 in favor, nobody opposed, no abstentions. The PAB notes that regarding Proposal C1, minimum TCEY for IPHC Regulatory 2A, discussion spanned both days, with multiple discussions with the authors and the creation of separate motion that provides for the request made in Proposal C1 with some changes. After that motion was made, discussed and adopted, the PAB took action on Proposal C1. The PAB recommends that the Commission oppose Proposal C1 with 16 in favor and 1 opposed. PAB recommends, however, that a TCEY of 1.65 million pounds be adopted for Area 2A by applying the coast-wide SPR value and supplementing 2A's resulting quota with a proportionate amount of each remaining U.S. regulatory areas from 2C to 4 CDE inclusive. The purpose of this is to stay within the total mortality reflected in the F value adopted for the coast-wide removals. PAB also recommends to the Commission look at a 2A year-to-year in this regard, not set a 5-year term for an elevated allocation. The motion was adopted unanimously, 18-0. The PAB recommends that the Commission take no action on Proposal C2, but encourages the Commission to request information from the Pacific Council relating to this issue, including the process of changing from the current fishery to an IFQ fishery or other management options. Encourage the Council to consider a wide range of options and to keep IPHC informed of their progress. Motion passed unanimously, 18 in favor, 0 opposed. Catch limits. The PAB recommends that the Commission adopt an F46 fishing intensity for the 2019 season and apply a slow up, fast down, smoother to regulatory area numbers. Further, to comply with the motion passed earlier regarding C1, allocate 1.65 million pounds, and that's TCEY, by the way, not FCEY, to Area 2A, taken proportionately from each Alaskan regulatory area. The motion passed along country lines, 11 in favor and 7 opposed. I will note that at this point in time, the 7 opposed was the Canadian delegation. There were no abstentions. The 11 in favor was the American delegation. Listed below are the catch limits for each regulatory area for a total of 37.63. We'd also like to say at this time that the Canadian delegation of the 7 companies that were represented, because of recruitment issues that we've had and still have, we did not want to go above 37.21, and also then leaving the apportionment distribution up to the commissioners as to decide how to distribute that 37.21, which would include 1.65 for Area 2A. So for Area 2A, you have the 1.65, for Area 2B, 6.01, Area 2C, 6.17, 3A, 1354, 3B, 306. These are millions of pounds, 4A, 1.86 million, and 4B, 1.47, 4CDE, 3.87 for a total TCEY of 37.63 million pounds. The PAG notes that although this motion passed, the Canadian offered, as I said, a substitute motion for a total of 37.21 million pounds with the same shifting of the appropriate share of each regulatory area in Alaska to 2A to increase their TCEY to 1.65 million pounds. Under the Canadian motion, prior to calculations affecting the Alaskan regulatory area 2A, we get 1.32, 2B 7.1, 2C 6.34, basically identical to the 2018 adopted quota. This motion failed, 7 in favor, which was the Canadian delegation, 11 opposed, which was the U.S. delegation. I'd also like to add at this point in time, this is one of the very rare occasions in PAB's 24 years that we didn't have a consensus. And the chairman is not too really happy about it. The rationale in the Canadian motion was to keep status quo, addressing 2A's concerns the same way in the earlier motion that the U.S. did. PAG notes the rationale for the U.S. motion concerned catch limits, rationale in support of an F46 harvest policy with slow up, fast down. Overall stock issues or stock status, U.S. PAB members are encouraged by improvements in precision and enhanced fisheries independent setline surveys and have achieved, however, stock is facing a series of incoming weak year classes from 2006 to 2010 that will reduce spawning biomass in the near term. In response to the weak incoming year classes, the setline surveys and numbers per unit effort is at a 20-year low and slowed continued decline in most management areas and coast-wide. The setline surveys weight per unit effort also declined in 5 of the 8 management areas and showed an overall 7% decline coast-wide. The commercial weight per unit effort are at low levels and showed decline in many areas. The U.S. PAB members also note that the recalibration of fishing intensity from F41 to F46 depends to a large degree on the estimated strength of the incoming 2011 and 2012 year classes, and note the significant uncertainty associated with the size of the 2011 and 2012 year classes at this time. This uncertainty is expected to be lessened within 1 or 2 years of additional data. For these reasons, U.S. PAB members recommend a precautionary approach to setting the 2019 catch limits until additional data can resolve recruitment, uncertainty, and stronger year classes enter the fishery. We are supporting the slow up, fast down management procedure to smooth the annual variability in catch limits and account for survey encounter variability and imprecision imprecision. Slow up means the catch limit is set 1/3 of the way up from last year. The TCEYs to this year's TCEY by area. Fast down means the catch limit is set halfway between last year's TCEY and this year's TCEY. MSE process, the U.S. PAB members appreciate the work of the MSAB and the results put forward by the MSE process. We note this work is ongoing and financial recommendation of scale and distribution are expected within 1 to 2 years. The U.S. PAB members support the goals established by the MSAB relating to conservation and fishery performance and the prioritization of conservation objectives over fisheries performance is necessary. The U.S. PAB members believe the catch limits recommended by this motion incorporated many of the recommendations by the MSAB by 1, starting with a reference SPR value of F46, which is the current IPHC reference harvest rate, and within the range recommended by the MSAB and appropriately precautionary given the stock status considerations noted above. Using the exiting interim stock distribution inputs of under 032 distribution and relative harvest rates among management areas. Using a smoothing management procedure to reduce annual variability to acceptable levels, the smoothing management procedure chosen by the U.S. members of the PAB is a slow up, fast down, which has considerable precedent, which has considerable precedent in the IPHC process, is astronomically prioritizing conservation over fishery performance and has been shown to meet the MSC objectives in recent analysis. Further prioritization conservation over fisheries performance is recommending a final harvest rate of F48 after the SUFD is applied. PAB agrees that both catch limit proposals were guided by the principle of conservation while setting catch limits, which using the F46 with an SUFD smoother does. In the end, the two countries' proposals weren't that far apart poundage-wise. General recommendations by PAB to the commissioners. The PAB recommends that the Commission Secretariat be involved in the work at the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council on halibut abundance-based management. IPHC provides staff members as needed and time for staff members to attend meetings and provide advice on the subject of halibut bycatch management. This motion passed with 16 in favor and 2 abstentions. The PAB urgently requests the Commission to provide a publication similar to what has been provided in the past, known as the Blue Book. As I said, David, there's still a bunch of us dinosaurs around. The PAB notes that this is a request with unanimous and characterized as having the highest level of importance for next year. PAB notes that this has been submitted before. The PAB notes that the quality of its deliberations and its overall productivity is damaged by not having the Blue Book available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blake. Are there questions for Blake? Bob?
So Blake, I've been picking up some information because of the harvest of about 8 million pounds on the East Coast, Canadian Maritimes, as well as in New England, and their delivery of halibut during our closed period that some of our processors have been starting to talk about, should we have a longer season? Did that discussion ever come up in the Processor Advisory Board? Do you think it's worth a future debate in terms of adding a month or 2 months to our season? First of all, that East Coast Canadian halibut quota is 4,000
6,164 metric tons, which is 9,180,000 and change. A longer season to compete against that, yes, the processors agree with that. But having said that, this year is kind of different because of possibility of the Alaskans not being able to get their permits on time. Our initial 13th of March to 13th of September, which was proposed by a Canadian delegate, was to partially address the influx of Norwegian and East Coast North American halibut. But we had to readdress our season date decision at the request of our U.S. members because they were concerned they might not be able to get their permits on time, and the Canadians expressed that they would not want to be put in a position where they would start fishing earlier than our Alaskan and Area 2A counterparts. But a longer season, I think, would probably be a good idea down the road.
Other questions for Blake? Blake, I had one on paragraph 26B. I might have missed this in your presentation, but the 26B says that the commission look at IPHC regulatory area 2A year to year in this regard and not set a 5-year term for elevated allocation. And my question is, did I missed on the rationale for that particular clause?
I think the rationale behind that was, first of all, it is setting a precedent. And with the lack of recruitment in all regulatory areas, even though their surveys are apparently up, they've done an excellent job on reducing their trawl bycatch. They appeared, based on what we were told with the people there doing the presentation and the backup, that they're managing their fishery well, and the big problem is that the catch sharing plan and just is not effective on a smaller quota. But PAB is a cautious board, and so we thought, okay, let's try it, see how it works, see if there's any repercussions, and we didn't want to get locked into any long-term fixed in stone quotas or season dates or anything like that.
Okay, thanks very much, Blake. Are there other questions? Blake, I'm not seeing anything any further questions for you, but I just wanted to note on a personal note, your long years of help to the overall commission, and as chair of PAB for many years. We had the reception last night, and it was noted there, but I just wanted to say this to the commission at large, that it was your help in providing me advice and knowledge about the halibut fishery was very much appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's, as I said last night, it's been great. I couldn't ask for a better career, and I will miss, over time, I will miss probably everybody. But, we're still the greatest. I don't know about Jerry Christensen yet, but like I said, there's two kinds of people: fish people and those that wish they were. And in my mind, we're the greatest on the planet, from the commission all the way down to the deckhands on the boats and that. We're just a very unique group of people. And I thank you very much for your words.
Thanks, Blake, and enjoy the next stage of what you're going to be doing.
All I have to do now is find Adam's counterpart on the gillnet salmon side, and I can start all over again.
I'll give them a heads up. Next up is the report from Conference Board, and Jim Lane, I think, and Jeff are making that presentation.
Good morning. We good? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Before we start, Jeff and I would just like to thank the Secretary to help for over the course of this meeting, especially Lara and Eric for help with the reporting and note taking, and of course Lara, who actually took a lot of the notes and composed the draft of the report for us to edit, which allowed us to spend a little bit of time at the Hannah reception this year, and that's been something that hasn't happened for quite a while. So thank you very much. I'll note that, geez, I'm sounding like the commission stuff now. That there are some things that Jeff and I have realized that we've kind of missed in some of the discussion points. This is a draft, so there is a particular set of discussions that were around the 2A catch limit that we actually did miss until we saw it this morning. So if by permission from the commissioners, we can put at least the flavor of what was discussed, and there is a minority report that from the conference board about that. So the opening session, Halibut Commission, a total of 70 members attended the session from the two contracting parties. Canada accredited 2 new members, and the U.S.A. accredited seven new members. The list of participants pointed to Appendix A. The meeting was opened by Mr. Jeff Kaufman, U.S.A., and Mr. Jim Lane, Canada, and welcome participants to Victoria. In accordance with the rules and procedures, the CB noted that the requirement to elect co-chairs and the option to elect 2 vice-chairpersons of the CB until the beginning of the next session. The CB called nominations for the co-chairs for the next till the next session 2020. Mr. Jim Lane for Canada, Mr. Jeff Kaufman for United States were nominated and seconded as elected, and no action was taken on vice chairs. The CB adopted the agenda as provided in Appendix 2, which included an item to discuss the current work by the IPHC on manager strategy evaluations. When these documents provided at CB 089. The CB noted that the IPHC provided an introduction to uses and guides for the IPHC web-based mortality projection tool. The CB also noted that the summary of the IPHC regulatory area-specific mortality projections for 2009 based on an interim management procedure and other alternatives. So IPHC rules of procedure. The CB noted paper IPHC 2019 AM095-20, which provided an opportunity to consider proposed amendments to the IPHC rules of procedures from 2017. The CB agreed to facilitate intersessional communication with the IPHC Secretariat and among all CB members by providing contact names and email addresses in the CB report list of participants in Appendix 1. The CB noted that an ad hoc working group would be formed to consider specific topics with 5 CB members from Canada, Jerry Christensen, Chris Spohr, Chuck Ashcroft, Bill Shaw, and Jim Lane, and 6 CB members from U.S.A., Kathy Hansen, Duncan Fields, Jim Johnson, Angel Drobenka, probably pronounced that wrong, I'm sorry, Rebecca Skinner, and Linda Blinken. To work through this year, to work through the year to develop a set of recommendations on the terms of reference and an accreditation process for CB members in the intern to be brought to the CB 090 for action. The CB recommended the Commission defer the revised IPHC rules of procedures from 2019 to AM096 for adoption, specifically related to the CB, which with respect to the terms of reference as an ad hoc group that was formed, felt that changes are more than clarifying or technical in nature. This was supported unanimously at the conference board for that recommendation. Fishing period and season opening dates. The CB agreed that for both opening and closing dates should emphasize the longest fishing period possible. The following reasons were given for this rationale. So they want to maximize time to catch their quota, and they also want a longer season for market and bycatch considerations, particularly with yellow eye rockfish, sablefish. The CB noted that several members expressed concern regarding the time the U.S.A. may require to have fishing permits ready for early March opening, but at the same time, they still wanted to make a recommendation of the early date. So the CB recommended the following fishing period dates for 2019. Opening 2nd of March in favor 56, against 1, abstained 13. So this is the entire conference board. Closing November 30th, in favor 53, against 1, and 16 abstentions. Just to note, most of the abstentions were from recreational representatives that did not actually have the opening and closing dates did not affect them all that much. The CB recommended the commission does the following, with 68 in favor, 1 against, 1 abstain. Support the work to date by the MSAB and identified goals and objectives. Support prioritization of conservation over fisheries performance objectives. Support preliminary SPR target of 42 to 43% and SPR range of 40 to 46%. And support the goal of restraining average annual variability to 15% or less, and encourage MSAB to continue to develop management procedures that control annual variability, such as those presented at this meeting. AM095. Mortality limits. The CB noted paper IPHC 2019 AM095-11 revision 1, which provided an introduction and uses guides for the IPHC's web-based mortality projection tool. Coastwide perspective. The CB noted that U.S.A. put forth a motion to recommend an SPR of 48% with a coastwide TCY of 38.23 million pounds with the following rationale. Canada was, so the vote on this one was Canada 0, 30, in favor 0, against 35, abstentions no, U.S.A. in favor 33, against 0, and abstention 0. So this is from the U.S. side. The goal of establishing a conservative overall number as the first step to be followed by a decision on distribution, which is the IPHC recommended process under the adopted SPR management approach. Recognition that to a large degree, the determination of the 2018 fishing intensity is F48 depends on the estimated strength of the incoming 2011 and 2012 year classes, noting the significant uncertainty associated with the size of the 2011 and 2012 year classes at this time, that this uncertainty is expected to be resolved with additional years data, and recognizing the need to be conservative until the strength of these 2-year classes is confirmed. And the overly optimistic estimation of the 2005-2006 year classes resulted in fishing intensity over the target rates and a significant retrospective bias to the detriment of the Pacific halibut stock. The CB noted the following perspectives shared by the U.S.A. CB members. Encouraged by improvements in precision the enhanced FIS has achieved, however, note stock is facing a series of incoming weak year classes from 2006 to 10 that will reduce spawning biomass in the near term. In response to the weak incoming year classes, the FIS net NPUE is at a 20-year low and showed continued decline in most management areas and coast-wide. FIS WPUE also declined in 5 of the 8 management areas and showed an overall 7% decline coast-wide. Commercial WPUE are at low levels and should decline in many areas. Support of the slow up, fast down management procedure to smooth annual variability in catch limit and account for survey and counter variability and imprecision. Slow up means TCY is 1/3 the way up from last year. TCY this year to this year's TCY. TCY by area, fast down means TCY set halfway between last year's TCY and this year's TCY. And slow up, fast down adds conservation benefits by dampening potential increases, particularly notable in 2018 for Area 3A, where the SPR 46 reference level would have resulted in a 30% TCEY increase in this area instead of a 10% increase included in this motion. The CB noted the following perspectives shared by U.S.A. CB members. Appreciation for the work of the MSAB and the results put forward by MSE process, noting this is ongoing, and final recommendation on scale and distribution are expected within 1 to 2 years. Support for the goals established by the MSAB relating to conservation and fisheries performance and the prioritization of conservation objectives over fisheries performance as necessary. Support for the MSE process is introduction of management procedures to define coastwide scale and distribution results. Belief this process will improve the quality and equity of annual mortality limit setting process while preserving the ability of the CB to recommend and the commissioners to consider short-term tactical changes. The CB noted that Canada moved to approve a TCEY of 7.38 million pounds for Canada and IPHC regulatory 2B. Canada in favor 35, against 0, abstained 0. U.S. in favor 0, against 30, and abstained 3. The CB noted the following perspectives shared by CB members from Canada. Support the work for the MSAB and the recommendations, which calls for a target SPR of 42 to 43 for a long-term harvest policy, but also include a range of 40 to 46 to allow for short-term tactical decisions. That a good choice at a coast-wide level does not necessarily result in good outcomes given how the harvest is presently allocated, and that there are concerns about the TCY that results from a target SPR of the MSAB recommendation. That there is concern regarding allocating large amounts to the western areas given FIS results and the continued downward trend, and poor recruitment, and that we should see another year of the 2011-12 year class before relying on it too heavily. And there's a minor edit here. It says discomfort, but it's actually supposed to say comfort with what was being seen and experienced on the grounds in 2B this year. The CB noted that Canadian CB members have never agreed with apportionment methodology, and the following perspectives shared by the CB members from Canada. There's no agreement or biological justification on the current distribution procedures apportionment to allocate to regulatory area level. As a result, Canada has initially proposed a 20% share at a coast-wide TCEY. That has been the average for Canada for the past 5 to 6 years. And based on an SPR 46, which is consistent with the MSAB recommendations, and having heard concerns from some conference board members about a 20% share, Canada amended its proposal to 18.5%, which at an SPR 46 results in an IPHC regulatory area 2B TCEY of 7.38 million pounds. That MSAB has not commented on a slow up, fast down adjustment mechanism, and notes it will be taken to the MSAB for evaluation. And the proposed 2B TCEY is also responsive to FIS results. It represents a 4% increase in the IPHC regulatory area 2B TCEY, and the FIS 032 WCB increased by 6% compared to last year. The CB noted the following perspective shared by U.S.A. CB members. That the same management procedure adopted and implemented in Alaska should be adopted and implemented in Canada, and that full rationale from the above supports consistent treatment of Canada and Alaska. Surveyed distribution provides an objective measure to stock distribution and an equitable basis for TCEY distribution. In recent years, the FIS has found 11 to 13% of the Pacific halibut stock in the IPHC regulatory area 2B. The IPHC regulatory area 2B TCEY should be proportional to abundance. A TCEY in excess of 13% of total is unfair to other harvesters and unacceptable to the U.S.A. The enhanced FIS conducted in IPHC regulatory area 2B and 218 indicated there has been a chronic overestimation of abundance in IPHC regulatory area 2B by the FIS. Catch levels similar to last year will result in a harvest level even further above reference levels than previously assumed. Canada points to bycatch in Alaska as a rationale for harvest above the reference SPR, but recent data supplied by the IPHC secretariats indicate that Alaska catch impact on IPHC regulatory area 2B is in the 400,000 pound range, not 1 to 2 million pounds extra mortality Canada has imposed on the Pacific halibut stock. In addition, both IPHC regulatory area 2A and 2C have addressed and controlled bycatch, with IPHC regulatory area 2C eliminating trawling and responsible for the lowest bycatch levels of any area. FIS stations along the border between IPHC regulatory areas 2B and 2C showed significant decline, which may be associated with excess fishing pressure by lodges and other harvesters in the area. IPHC regulatory area 2A and 2C are concerned overharvest by the IPHC regulatory area 2B fishermen are negatively impacting region 2 Pacific halibut abundance. IPHC regulatory area 2B fish WPUE is significantly lower than IPHC regulatory area 2C, even with the 218 drop in IPHC regulatory area 2C WPUE and the 218 increase in the IPHC regulatory area 2B. Allocating a higher percentage of total IPHC regulatory 2B than 2C does not reflect relative health of the stock between the two areas. Canada's request for an SPR 46% and 7.38 pounds can only be achieved with a 6.2% reduction in the U.S. TCEY. This is inequitable to U.S. fishermen, and recognizes treaty rights of IPHC regulatory 2A tribes, and for the 2.8 and for 219 will support 1.65 TCEY. The CB noted that U.S.A. moved to approve a U.S.A. TCEY of 32.22 million pounds with the following TCEYs for the IPHC regulated areas in the U.S.A. For 2A, 1.65 million pounds, 2C, 6.3 million pounds, 3A, 13.81 million pounds, 3B, 3.12 million pounds, 4A, 1.9 million pounds, 4B, 1.5 million pounds, and 4C, D, and E, 3.94 million pounds. So the vote, Canada in favor 0, against 36, abstention 0, and U.S.A. in favor 34, against 0, abstention 0. The CB noted the following perspectives shared by U.S.A. CB members. Use of 032 WPUE proportion in each IPHC regulatory area. The use of relative harvest rates by IPHC area 2A to 3A equals 1, 3B to 4 is 0.75. The use of the following management procedures: an initial SPR F46 with distribution-based default mortality percentage from the IPHC mortality tool. Slow up, fast down smoothing procedure based on 50% down and 33% up on difference between 2018 and 2019 reference, F46 TCUY, and IPHC regulatory area 2A adjustment of 0.6 million pounds in addition. Belief that catch limits recommended by this motion incorporate many of the recommendations of the MSAB by using repeatable management procedures and data sources consistently and equitably set the scale and distribution of mortality limits, starting with a reference SPR value of F46, which is the current IPHC reference harvest rate within the range recommended by MSAB and appropriately precautionary given the stock status considerations noted above. Using the existing interim stock distribution inputs of 032 distribution and relative harvest rates among management areas, using a smoothing management procedure to reduce annual variability to acceptable levels, further prioritizing conservation over fishery performance, and recommend a final harvest rate of F48 after slow up, fast down is applied. Regulatory area perspectives. IPHC regulatory area 2A. The CB noted the following from IPHC regulatory area 2A harvesters. Allocation less than what has been proposed it makes it extremely difficult to implement the fisheries off the west coast of USA under the catch share plan among the tribes, recreational and commercial users. Average removals over time has been 1.79 million pounds, which suggests the area can sustain this level of removals. The macaw unrestricted directed fishery CPUE is up 200% since 2013. There is trawl rationalization on the west coast, and since its implementation, there has been dramatic increases in Pacific halibut abundance, with a dramatic decrease in Pacific halibut bycatch by about 800,000 pounds. This is a terminal fishery, such as other areas do not have to pay for this increase, and the spawning biomass is between 150 and 250 million pounds, such that this small increase has no statistical influence on the spawning biomass. IPHC regulatory area 4B. The CB noted the following from regulatory area 4A, B, and 4C, D, and E. The burden of conservation in Alaska's biological areas has fallen hardest on IPHC regulatory area 4B in relative distribution terms, with a direct application of a 46 SPR providing a 4.9% distribution, while applying the slow up, fast down approach results in a 4% distribution. And this is a separate biological area, allowing a higher catch at the full 4.9% distribution level would have been appropriate, given the 17% increase in the FIS together with increases in fish and commercial WPUE and NPUE. Recommendation. The CB recommended the following TCY mortality limits for the 2019 fishing period as provided in Table 1, which translates to a mortality estimate by sector as provided by the IP Secretariat and an SPR 46%. 2A, 1.6 million pounds. 2B, 7.38 million pounds, 2C, 6.3 million pounds, 3A, 13.81 million pounds, 3B, 3.12 million pounds, 4A, 1.9 million pounds, 4B, 1.5 million pounds, and 4C, D, and E, 3.94, for a total convention area of 39.60 million pounds. So regulatory area proposal for 218. IPHC Secretariat regulatory proposals. Fishery limits, section 4. The CB noted regulatory proposal IPHC 2019 AM095 Prop A1, which aim to improve clarity and transparency of fishery limits in the IPHC fisheries regulations. The CB recommended that the Commission adopt the proposal with the addition of the mortality limits for each contracting party by sector as detailed in section 6 in all in favor. It was unanimous. Commercial fishing periods. The CB noted regulatory proposal IPHC 2019 AM95 Prop A2, which specified fishing periods for the commercial Pacific halibut fisheries. See section 4 for summary. CB noted that no action was taken on this proposal, which specifies fishing periods for the commercial Pacific fishing area 2A, and for summary for summary of the discussions and recommendations, see section 4. The CB noted there was a willingness to explore fixed dates to allow the improved business planning. However, the dates in the proposal by the Secretariat were not supported. IPHC fishery regulations minor amendments. CB noted regulatory proposal IPHC 2019 AM095 proposal 3, which proposed amendments to ensure clarity and consistency in the IPHC fishery regulations. The CB recommended the Commission adopt the proposal, and this was unanimous. The CB noted their support and appreciation for the efforts to simplify and clarifying existing regulations. Contracting party regulatory proposals. Charter management measures and IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A. The CB noted regulatory proposal IPHC 2019 AM95 095 Proposition B1, which proposed IPHC regulatory changes for charter Pacific halibut fisheries in IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A in order to achieve the charter Pacific halibut allocation under the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council's Pacific halibut catch sharing plan. The CB recommended the Commission adopt the proposal. Canada abstained. U.S.A. in favor 32, against 0, abstentions 3. Other stakeholder regulatory proposals. Minimum TCY in IPHC regulatory area 2A. The CB noted regulatory proposal IPHC 2019 AM095 Proposition C1, which proposed adopting a TCEY for IPHC regulatory area 2A that supports an FCEY no lower than 1.5 million pounds. In years when the distribution would be indicated at FCE higher, 1.5 million be available, but the number would also be adopted. Sorry, in years when the distribution would indicate an FCY higher than 1.5 is available, that number would adopt it. Yeah, sorry, that's right. The CB recommended the Commission does not adopt the proposal. Canada in favor 4, against 17, abstentions 8, and US in favor 11, against 14, abstentions 7. So there was a lot of discussion around this proposal, both at this time and during the catch limit discussion up above. But the CB noted there was general support for the proposed IPHC regulatory area 2A TCEY level, but not within a regulatory framework with both a fixed limit and no defined term. IPHC regulatory area proposed 2A quota proposal. The CB noted paper IPHC 2019 AM095 Prop C2, which proposed individual quota system for the IPHC regulatory area 2A. The CB noted that no action was taken on this proposal at this time. The CB recommended that Commission adopt an earlier start date, second half of May, for the IPHC regulatory area 2A non-treaty directed commercial fisheries, and then non-directed commercial fisheries initial fishing period. Canada abstained, US in favor 15, against 0, abstentions 9. Bycatch. The CB noted the presentation in Amendment 80 group detailing their bycatch avoidance measures, including the most recent results of the experimental fishing permit on deck sorting. So there was about a 30 to 40-minute presentation and answers by this group, which was well received by the conference board. The CB noted continued concern regarding bycatch impacts to the Pacific halibut stock. The CB urged the commissioners to communicate these concerns to the North Pacific Fishery Management Council. New work by the IPHC Secretariat includes that U-26 bycatch impacts to the spawning potential of the Pacific halibut stock on a ratio of 1.18, i.e. 1 pound of bycatch results in a 1.8 pound loss of future Pacific halibut yield to the directed fisheries, TCEYs, noting that 65% of the U-26 halibut bycatch mortality occurs in IPHC regulatory area 4C, D, and E, where observer coverage on the groundfish vessels is high and bycatch reduction incentive programs are in place. Approximately 28% of the U-26 bycatch occurs in Region 3, where observer coverage on trawl vessels is lower. The CB urged the commissioners to strongly recommend that the council prioritize Pacific halibut bycatch reduction in the Bering Sea and the Gulf of Alaska and take meaningful action to protect future potential of the Pacific halibut stock and the directed fisheries. Also, increase observer coverage on the Gulf of Alaska trawl vessels to more accurately account for bycatch and its impacts on the Pacific halibut stock and directed Pacific halibut fisheries. So, other business. Annual meeting documents. The CB urged the Commission to have IPHC Secretariat provide a printed, streamlined paper version of the annual meeting documents for CB members that contains relevant documents in regards to the TCEY discussions such as SPR ratios, decision tables, risk tables, WPUE commercial graphs, and time series of data by regulatory area, O32 fish data, NPUE's fish data, and FCEY, TCEY conversions. For previous years, average fish weight by regulatory area, time series of total removals by regulatory area, and recent reference TCEY by regulatory area and adopted TCEY. The CB noted the request for at least one hard copy of a RAW be available for reference, and that IPH Secretariat provide a method to produce adequate paper copies of requested documents to CB members in future meetings. This would likely be a 25-page document. If this is a financial hardship, the Commission should, at the time of registration, ask if an individual wanted a copy of this modified document and that they agree to purchase cover the cost of printing. MSAB position. The CB urged the Commission to consider Angel Drobonica or Forest, what's the last? What was that? Braden Forest? Forest Braden for the vacant seat on the MSAB as a result of Bruce Gabriel's resignation. So Bruce, as people may know, has been quite ill. Review the draft and adoption of the report of the 88th. So the reviewing of the draft. So the report of the 89th session of the IPHC Conference Board will be adopted via correspondence because this is a draft and there will be time for, I don't know exactly what the time reference is, but time for comments by CB members.
Mr. Chairman, with permission from the Commission, I would like to read into record the minority report for the McCaw proposal, C1, which we failed to include.
The minority report from who, Jeff?
It is, we failed to include a minority report for the very important discussion that was held around the McCaw 2A regulatory proposal, C1, and we received that from, in writing from Conference Board member Tom Markings that that is a representative of 2A. So if you'd like, we'd read that into the record. If not, we could include it at a later time.
Is that normal to have minority reports?
So we went through this yesterday, and it is, by the terms of reference of the Conference Board, if a motion fails within a contracting party, in this case it failed on both the Canadian side and the U.S.A. side, so the motion was made and it failed within the U.S. side, and under that scenario, the provision allows for a minority report.
I'll just check with my fellow commissioners if their views on accepting the reading of the minority report. Any opposition? No, that's fine, Jeff.
Okay, and it's fairly short. So the regulatory proposal for a minimum TCEY for the 2A region was presented by the Makah tribe at the conference board yesterday, but was not supported by a majority of either of the contracting parties. We find that unfortunate. The item was brought forth at the end of a long and tiring day and followed a contentious discussion of the TCEY allocations between the Alaska and Canadian representatives. It was apparent that while there was overwhelming support by most members for 2A to be granted the 1.65 million pound TCEY and a 1.5 million pound FCEY as requested, a multi-year minimum floor TCEY concept for a 3 to 5 year period was lacking support. There was considerable confusion by many over the concept and the skepticism of the request. This later statement is that we wish to address. The Makah tribe is making this request for the entire 2A area consisting of 3 Pacific states. The tribes are not just stakeholders in this process, but are in fact co-managers with a long and respected history of fisheries management. They work in conjunction with 3 state governments, the federal government and the IPHC for sustainable conservation policies and best practices management goals regarding harvest of Pacific halibut. They have developed a short-term responsible and thoughtful proposal for management that was developed with the cooperation of the IPHC Secretariat and included principles suggested by the MSAB. Their concept is to present a short-term solution for management in an area that is at the southern end of the Pacific halibut range, has no conservation concern to the stock, stays within the SPR 46 stated goals of the MSAB, and smooths out annual variation in the FIS and patchiness of population density that is prevalent in Area 2A. This is a pilot program of an alternative management concept proposed for the short duration under the full review and control of the Commission and Secretariat. This does not affect other regulatory areas and is unique in both situation and location. We in the 2A area support the concept and believe it should be given the opportunity to see if it is a successful management scenario for this unique area. The principal objection at the conference board seemed to center around being a multi-year proposal. The contracting parties wanted the opportunity to consider a TCEY request annually, but voiced support for the 1.65 million pound TCEY. A secondary issue was the concern that if the short-term minimum TCEY proposal was adopted, that level would be held in perpetuity until such time as a regulatory change was passed to remove the minimum. This is not in the proposal, nor was it stated in the motion on the floor to support this regulatory proposal, but the concern lingered on and confused many and created uncertainty and suspicion. We in 2A believe this concept justifies consideration by the Commission, and a minority of the conference board supports adoption with the time period selected at the discretion of the Commission with Secretariat advice.
All right, thanks very much, Jim and Jeff. That was a lot to go through. Appreciate the effort in getting that all together in such short order. Any questions from the conference board report from commissioners? Neil?
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jeff. Couple questions. So wanted to understand a little bit more about the conference board's position regarding the fishing periods for 2A. As far as I can tell, it's in clause 31 of your report. I wondered if you could tell us a little more about the rationale for the conference board's position, which looks like it's no action to be taken. Can you just fill us in on the nature of the conference board's discussion?
Okay, trying to remember back, even though that was in the afternoon. I believe that we had a presentation or some clarification by was it the NIMS? Pacific Council, and that they've communicated to the IPHC that there's a number of other factors that need to be further looked into and discussed before they would support that change. And so the CB deferred taking any action until that work had been undertaken by the representatives, the 2A people. and the North Pacific Management Council, or the Pacific Council.
And just actually on the next clause down about the fixed season dates, as far as I can remember, there has not been much support for fixed dates in the past, and I noted that looks like the conference board was willing to explore fixed dates. Does that apply to both the open and closed dates, or had the conference board not been that specific?
I'm not too sure that it was that specific, but I think it's the concept of fixed season dates was, the conference board on both sides was open to exploration of that, but there was no support for the ones that proposed. But as far as the concept of fixed dates, they're willing to have discussions and interactions about, okay, what would that look like, and how, if it was going to go that way, how would that work?
Any other questions? Richard?
Regarding, I guess, item number 17, E and F, regarding the slow up, fast down concept. I know the concept surrounds around it, trying to keep the variability from year to year on the TC wise within that 15%. Does this apply to all regulatory areas or just a regulatory area that went outside of that 15%? So if a regulatory area increased only 5% or 10%, would that slow up, fast down still be applied to that regulatory area?
So, and Jeff can add it to me if I got this wrong, but it's the understanding is that the slow upside fast down is applied to the SPR rate, the coastwide SPR, and then whatever resulting catch limits comes out of setting an SPR, and then you have an agreed upon. In the future, an agreed upon sharing of the distribution or whatever that methodology is. And so my understanding is that using whatever smoother, this is a slow up, fast down, it would then apply to all the regulatory areas. And I think there's some statements within the comments that actually reflect that as well.
And Jim covered it fairly well, but to answer your question about, the areas that have smaller fluctuations within the 15%, the way it was spoken to at the conference board, my understanding is that it would apply to all areas, regardless of the percentage increase or decrease. So even under the situation here, where 2C, for instance, was recommended a 1% cut, it would still receive the half down or the fast down approach. And for other areas that were, so it would apply regardless. And so I guess it was the desire of some members of the conference board that it be applied equally among all regulatory areas, regardless of the size or the size of the up or down suggestions.
Bob?
So another question on that, Jeff. So if 3B under your proposal, and I don't know if it does this, but this is an example. If the 3B quota went up 50% under the conference board's proposal, would it be truncated then by no more than a 15% increase? Is that what you're saying?
No, my understanding is even in that situation, it would still be 1/3 of the way up. So it's 1/3 of the way between last year's approved TCEY and this year's scientific recommended or scientific TCEY at the F46 level. So, so if it was a 50,000 or if it was a 50% increase, basically they would take 1/3 of that, even if it was above 15%.
So what you have here is a number of different smoothers that were discussed. One is the full slow up, fast down, the 1/3 up or 50% down, and then there was the 15% variability either way. So the slow up, fast down is one of the smoothers, and that was being proposed by some of the conference board members and by the U.S. side. But as you also, if you'd see in the comments about the MSAB work, that the MSAB continue to look at management procedures that reduce variability, overall variability between, within catch limits from year to year, and by using, the number of different type of smoothing mechanisms that were presented, such as were presented at this meeting, such as slow up, fast down, 15% variability here and there, and whatever else kind of works to meet the objectives of reduced variability between catch limits from year to year.
So does that mean that the 15% is a secondary governor?
No, that means this is a proposal for 2019. It is, I think, it was an example used as one way of using a smoother for this year to reduce the variability for conservation-based areas or conservation uses basis. You're mixing up what is the strategical type work that's being done at MSAB and sort of more tactical stuff here. So they're not proposing that this would be the only smoother, be used for in subsequent years. But for this year, this is a smoother that they chose to utilize. I think it's probably because most people were quite familiar with it. But it's doesn't mean that the 15% is off the table. It's all this work still has to be done by the MSAB, and this was just then using for this year for tactical reasons a smoother, and they chose, from my understanding, fast up, slow down.
I should also add to that the slow up, fast down approach is area by area. So each regulatory area, the percentage increase or decrease from last year's approved allocation to this year's proposed allocation. So again, by regulatory area.
Any other questions for either Jim or Jeff? Peter.
Hi, good morning, guys. On closing date, November 30th, I noticed you mentioned longer season for market and bycatch considerations. We just got a report from PEG that offered a consideration this year for November 7th due to market considerations this particular year. Was there any discussion around that?
So do you mean, was there any discussion between the PAB and the conference board or about solution dates, or just what they meant by marketing concerns?
Yes, marketing concerns this particular year.
So it's been my observation over a number of years at the conference board that, the fishermen have the fishermen's objectives for their fisheries and objective and marketing is maybe somewhat doesn't always align with what the PAB has. But for their marketing concerns, it was also that they have fisheries that still are open for other species that they have. And so they didn't get into great detail, but they just said for their markets or where they're pursuing, because you have a number of different fisheries from a wide area of the coast that have different sort of situations for each of them. So you try to make an opening, and you try to make season dates that accommodate as much of the concerns that people have from way out on the Aleutians to down and off of Washington and Oregon.
And one of the other considerations around marketing was that currently, apparently, there is Atlantic halibut on the market with the next vessel price of $9 per pound. And so they feel maybe that the Atlantic halibut is impeding upon the Alaska and Canada halibut fishery, and that the longer seasons and the longer we can keep fresh fish on the market, the better it will be. And so again, right now, it was reported that there's very strong ex-vessel prices on the East Coast in the range of $9 per pound. And so we could be tapping into that market as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jeff or Jim? No, we're going to let you go. That was a long report to go through, Jim. Much appreciated for the clarity of your presentation and the breadth of material that you were covering. We are scheduled for a break. It's now 10:30. I'm going to suggest we take a little bit of a longer break and get back together at about 5 to 11. Pardon me? There's not a period on the agenda for public comment on the conference board or PEG presentations, so not at this time, no. If people would take their seats, please. We're going to reconvene. All right. It's been pointed out that there's not been an opportunity for public comment, as there has been a tradition in the past. It is a change from the past. And we will provide an opportunity for public comment. But before we get to that, I would also like to say that the reason that there is not public comment on the current agenda is that there has already been 5 opportunities for public comment on a host of items throughout the course of the previous 3 days. And there was, I would say, very poor attendance at those sessions as far as public comment, and it covered regulatory proposals and other items that are of interest to the commission. I encourage you to take advantage of those. As I noted, there were 5 of them. And also, to me, the issue around providing comments at this point in time on the PAB and the conference board reports. We did hear one minority report, and as Jeff pointed out, that is provided in the terms of reference. And there is a concern by the commission that we have provided the opportunities in those boards as well as part of the advisory boards to the commission for people to get their views coalesced into a presentation to the commission for consideration. With that, given it's a change, we will carry on with public comment at this particular session. We as commissioners will in the future consider how we may make any other changes to the agenda, but as people were not aware of it, we will carry on at this point in time. I would like a show of hands of people that are interested in making any public comment for this particular time. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we are going to provide 2 minutes for public comment. Steve is going to hold up a card when you get to 1.5 minutes. And then after the 2 minutes, so politely ask you to stop, and that will be the process we're going to follow for this particular meeting. As I said, that for the future, we will, as commission, consider. You may wish to provide your views why you think it's important to provide public comment at this particular time. I'm not asking now, but for the future, so that we can consider that in the process for how we make decisions. All right, Steve, yep, oh, sorry, Chris.
Before you start, Mr. Chairman, if someone in the audience lost their iPhone, I think I might know where it is. So we found one downstairs.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chris. Steve?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as before, we'd ask you to sign up at the list in the back so we can call you up in an orderly way. And I have 3 people signed up so far. We'll call you up and ask you to come to the table at the front here where the microphones are. And I will be waving the card at the 1.5 minute part to let you know that time is near the end. So first on the list for public comment at this point is Linda Bankin, Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association.
Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for giving this opportunity to testify. I did not testify earlier. I thought I'd save it for one shot towards the end, but I understand that may be a poor choice in the future. Linda Benkin with Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association. I wanted to briefly address what I think was maybe confusing information about how the conference board and the PAG thought about application of slow up, fast down. It is not applied at the SBR coastwide level. It's applied on an area by area basis to buffer those annual changes, sometimes a little bit conflicting changes that we can see in a survey from one year to the next, and buffer that so you have a little bit more time to ground truth what might be happening in an area. I also wanted to just call your attention to the unanimous agreement that we had on the U.S. side, both in the conference board and in the processor advisory board this year, on not only the SPR, but also on the management procedure to apply and on the distribution between areas. I think that's really significant. We had that agreement, SPR 46, slow up, fast down distribution based on what the survey sees. And just to remind you that that's across over 2,000 stakeholders, 8 management regions, thousands of fishermen, processors, and thousands of miles of coastline came to that position after a lot of discussion, but unanimously in support of that approach that we recommend to you. And I'll stop there. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you. And next up is Heather McCarty, Central Bering Sea Fishermen's Association.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and commissioners, for allowing this. I appreciate that consideration. Heather McCarty for Central Bering Sea Fishermen's Association. I sit on the PAB and have done for the last 6 or 7 years. And I'd like to address and maybe just expand a little bit on the final motion that came from the PAB, which was encouraging the commissioners to work with the Secretariat in playing as great a role as possible in the development of the action that's currently underway at the North Pacific Fishery Management Council on abundance-based management of halibut bycatch. I have seen over the years the great concern that's come out of this body for halibut bycatch and its effects on the directed fishery and its effects on the halibut stocks. I know the Canadians have a particular concern about that. What's going on currently at the North Pacific Council, and I think you had a report from Dave Witherall on it earlier this week, so I'm not going to go into any detail because it's really complicated, but instead of just writing a letter to the council, as has been done many times, and I think that's a good thing to do, encouraging halibut bycatch management and control, I think you now have an opportunity to participate in a very meaningful way in what some of us believe is a really appropriate way to manage halibut bycatch. The concept is that halibut bycatch would be managed on the abundance of halibut, similar to the way it's managed at the IPHC, using some of the same indices, and similar to the way groundfish stocks are managed worldwide. So that's what that request was about, and I'm hoping that we can work together with the council to arrive at a reasonable way to deal with halibut bycatch in the Bering Sea. This is just for the Bering Sea. That's what I wanted to bring to you.
All right, thanks very much, Heather.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll commend our first 2 speakers on holding to the 2-minute limit. Nice work. Next up is Peggy Parker from the Halibut Association of North America.
Thank you, commissioners, for giving us this opportunity to testify. I have a lot to say, but I only have 2 minutes, so I'm going to try to make it short and powerful. This enterprise rests on the goodwill between industry and the IPHC. It is balanced on a tender fulcrum of mutual respect, and it has been for nearly 100 years. We appreciate this opportunity to testify. I was not aware of the other opportunities. I would actually ask for more chance to talk with the commissioners from both countries, separate from the delegate or country-specific gatherings that we have. My main message for now is to describe how requirements for reporting are getting in the way of efficiently taking part and engaging in the exchange of ideas and the exchange of positions from the industry, both the PAB and the CB. The oral reports that you got this morning, I think accurately reflect what happened at both of the meetings. These were motions and positions that came from great effort and difficulty to find common ground. Neither of the oral reports were submitted in a written form that was approved by either body before we adjourned. I hope that does not prevent you from taking them very seriously and giving them the due that they should get. That's all I have.
Thanks very much, Peggy.
Speaking next is Dave Kroonquist from the Coastal Conservation Association.
Good morning, Commission. I'm here to speak on behalf of IPHC 2019 AM095, Prop C1 Revision 1, or otherwise having been referred to as a Macaw 2A proposal. On behalf of the Coastal Conservation Association, Puget Sound Anglers, and affiliated sport fishing groups, we would like to extend our continued support of the Macaw proposal for halibut management and catch share plan 2A. We were disappointed that the proposal was voted down by the conference board. From our perspective, the proposal has great potential for the long-term management of halibut in 2A. The 2A fishery has a level of complexity that creates management issues for the various fishing communities. In Washington State, a catch sharing plan with 13 treaty tribes is unique to this area and court mandated. In Area 2A, fisheries are prosecuted by tribal needs, commercial subsistence, and ceremonial. Non-tribal commercial by both directed take and the incidental take by salmon trollers in the sablefish black cod fishery, and sport fisheries in 3 states. The Macaw proposal, developed in close cooperation with IPHC staff, would and still could provide an opportunity for a long-term look at halibut management in 2A that can create a safer and more consistent fishery for all parties, and in particular the small boat sport fishery. This new approach would strengthen the 2A catch share plan and provide stability throughout Area 2A without affecting the biomass. We would encourage the IPHC to move forward with the concept proposal, and we look forward to being able to work with the MSAB and the IPHC as appropriate. We believe that the adoption of this proposal would provide stability within Area 2A fisheries, as well as be beneficial to the current management strategy evaluation and MSAB analysis of multi-year catch policies. Thank you.
Bob, you had a question for Dave?
Button. So Dave, you made a comment that, and I want to understand this correctly, that the conference board did not support the Macaw proposal. Is the part that they didn't accept is the 5 or 4 year guarantee, or the time frame of that they wanted, but they did embrace the 2019 harvest level?
Thank you, Commissioner Halverson. My understanding sitting in there was that the general idea was supported, but it was there was no sunset provision, and I don't know that people fully understood the 3 to 5 year implementation plan.
Okay, thanks very much, Dave.
Thank you. Next up is Leonard Herzog, an Area 4 concerned fisherman.
Thanks for the opportunity. Like Linda, next time I'll testify towards the beginning. I just wanted to speak really briefly about the closing date and remind the older commissioners and the newer commissioners that in Alaska, our sablefish dates are tied to the halibut fish dates. I've come to this group each year asking for a November 30th closure date, and this year we got basically unanimous +1 vote from both Canada and the U.S. in support of the late date after explaining, our sablefish situation in depth to them, but I don't know that it really came clear in the minutes. I've gone to our council to see if we could segregate the dates, and it was not possible and isn't possible in the near future. There's also bycatch concerns that we can now deliver halibut if the same season's open. So our processors are open anyway out in the Aleutians and in the Bering Sea. So those processors are available to take our fish. So I'd appreciate. And the other thing is, in the last couple of years, I think your staff has been wrestling with the issue of how to provide, how to manage the season. And I'm hearing from them, without putting words in their mouths, that they could close the date for accepting data like on October 31st or November 1st and still have 98% of the data they need to manage for the next years. And we don't expect that there'll be significant landings of halibut during that time period. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Speaking next is Clem Tillion, Atka Fishermen's Association.
Nope. Pardon me. Clem Tillion, Aleut Corporation. You've got two political decisions. One is your 2A, give the macaw what they ask. It's utterly ridiculous not to. It's a small amount of fish, and it'll save us a lot of political problems. And the other is 4B, which no matter what you cut or move the numbers around, none of the fish that you save or don't harvest out there will show up down here. That is, when you pass 169 going out the Aleutian Islands, you are now in the Orient. Atka and Adak are north of Midway Island and south of Prince Rupert, British Columbia. They're just not part of the rest of your fishery. And to move numbers around there make no sense whatsoever. It should be managed as a separate unit. The other is the length of the seasons. We don't want to be throwing halibut back when we're fishing black cod. You just feed them to the whales. You're much better off to keep the fish if you've got a halibut quota. And that basically is all I wish to say. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Clem.
Speaking next is Chris Spohr from the Pacific Halibut Management Association of British Columbia.
Thank you, Commissioners. I guess first of all, I'd like to speak and get you to think about the appropriateness of providing this opportunity to lobby you directly like this. We have processes in place where the public is allowed to comment at the opening of the meeting. We have advisory groups where people can make comments. There's the opportunity for rebuttal. And now all we're doing here is providing an opportunity for people to end run that process. And if we allow that, what is the incentive for people to participate in an open and transparent matter in the current advisory body? So I'd just like you to take that into consideration in your deliberations. Having said that, now I've got to end run the process. I just want to two comments. One is SPR. I think there's some confusion on what SPR is and how it's used, and I'm still trying to wrap my brain around it, but that's part of a long-term harvest policy. It's not something that changes year to year. Commissioners can make short-term tactical decisions on annual TCUIs, and I think that's something we all have to try and understand what fits where. And like I say, I'm still working on it. And the final comment I'd make is just on slow up, fast down. There's been a lot of discussion on it at this meeting. I'd just like to comment that it is an ad hoc and arbitrary procedure. It has never been evaluated. I believe if you go back to the 2008 review of the coast-wide stock assessment and apportionment methodology by Francis and Medley, one or both of them comments that it's arbitrary or ad hoc. I can't remember the exact words they use. It is going to go back to the MSAB to be evaluated, which is appropriate. And once it's evaluated, then I think it's, as with other smoothing mechanisms, then I think it's something we can discuss. So I just want to make that comment. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, those are all the speakers that we have signed up.
All right, thanks very much, Steve, and thanks for the speakers that respected the time limits. And as I said, when we opened up this part of the session, we as commissioners will consider how best to get public comments and the appropriate time for those over the course of this meeting. As I did say, if you have views on that you want to express to the commission, you could drop us a letter or email. And we can take those into consideration as how we set the agendas going forward. So again, thank you for your comments and thoughts on the reports and other items that you brought forward at this particular time. As far as the agenda goes for the remainder of the morning, I'll just check with my other commissioners if there's any other particular items that they want to have a discussion with at this point in time. We're scheduled to talk about regulatory proposals after lunch, and just check in with there's any other items they wish to discuss before we break. Well, I'm not seeing any from any of the commissioners. Oh, I thought maybe Bob was, no. Okay. So with that, we're adjourned this particular session. We will be reconvening at 1:30 to go through each one of the regulatory proposals. I would draw your attention to the fact that we are planning on making decisions around the regulatory proposals where possible. And that will be discussed this afternoon when we reconvene. So thank you very much for the reports again, both from Conference Board and PAG, and for the efforts that you all put into that. I know that it's a lot of work to draw those together in a very short period of time. And we will take those into consideration as we deliberate how to move forward for setting TCY levels, SPRs, and regulatory area catch limits, in addition to the other decisions that we need to make at this meeting. Thanks again. Looking at regulatory proposals. We're going to bring them up on screen, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. So, Chris, just confirming you're ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, just flipping to the right page of my agenda, if you bear with me for 1 sec. Where else? There's that. Oh, they're not. They're not listed here. What's the first one, Steve? Hey, Steve, what's the first one? Could I have Proposition A1 up on the screen, please? Or Proposal A1? Steve, will you be so kind just to give a short explanation of this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Proposal A1 from the IPHC Secretariat proposes a couple of changes to Section 4 of the IPHC fishery regulations. And Section 4 is where the catch limits or the mortality distribution limits are listed. The proposal has two parts. One is to add a table of the TCEY decisions to the section. It also renames the section fishery limits. And then the table 2 of the section would be essentially the same as the current table 2, where we list the, and on your screen you see the table being added, which is a record of the TCEY decisions made by the commission. And then after that follows the table which is currently in the section of the regulations.
Thank you very much for that overview. Any discussion or questions from commissioners on the regulation proposal A1? Chris?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no discussion, I have a motion.
All right.
And I guess I'll provide some discussion around that motion. My motion is to take no action at this time on proposal A1. And with apologies to the Secretariat, because as I understand the proposal, it's primarily intended to be technical in nature. However, we, partly due to the fact that our government recently came back online after a month hiatus, have been unable until this meeting to really take a look at that language. Our staff have noted some potential concerns with modifying the language, and partly due to our own regulatory process that might be associated with it. And we simply need a little more time to digest it. And based on discussion with Steve and Dr. Wilson, that if we don't adopt it at this time, there's no major negative consequences. I'm going to propose no action at this time on the proposal, noting that it would be certainly my intent, our intent, to revisit this at the nearest opportunity.
Thanks for that motion, Chris. Can I have a seconder? Neil, second the motion. Is anyone opposed? It passes unanimously. Can we bring up the next proposal, proposal A2? And again, Steve, I was going to ask you to give a brief overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So proposal A2 from the IPHC Secretariat has to do with fishing periods, which is section 9 of the regulations. It has two parts. The first part is proposing overall commercial fishery dates, and we put in there as a marker the 15th of March to the 31st of October. That was intended to be the point of departure for discussion here at the annual meeting as the commission makes its decision, but we need a decision on the overall commercial fishery dates would apply to all IPHC regulatory areas. And then the second part of this proposal had to do in particular with the non-tribal directed commercial fishery in IPHC regulatory area 2A, where the Secretariat proposes longer fishing periods than the current 10-hour periods in use. We specifically proposed a 5 or 10-day fishing period, but are open to anything from 2 to 10. And our primary concern here was the safety of the fishery participants. So once again, there's two parts to this. One is the overall commercial fishing period for the whole coast. And the second part is specifically having to do with the non-tribal directed commercial fishery in IPHC regulatory area 2A.
Thank you for that explanation, Steve, on the two parts of this particular proposal. Is there any discussion among the commissioners on this particular proposal, either part A on the fixed dates or the second part on the non-tribal directed commercial fishery, aka Derby fishery proposal from the Secretariat? Yes, Peter.
I'd just like to say that I'm not super comfortable in a domestic issue, but as a harvester, I would be remiss not to mention that safety is a priority. As we know, all too well the true cost of fish. So I just thought I felt compelled to say that.
Thank you very much, Peter. Bob?
So, Mr. Chairman, I have some suggested direction with regards to the specific dates of opening on the directed halibut fishery. I'd like to defer those to Friday morning. With regards to the extending the season option, I would like to acknowledge the IPHC staff's cooperation with the Pacific Fishery Management Council to bring this issue of safety and the participants to us as well as to the general public. We received, Mr. Chairman, comments from the Pacific Council with concerns of yellow eye bycatch, and I can testify to that as the blackcod fishery that I represent off the lower coast has a limit of 100 fathoms to 150 fathoms that they cannot fish shoreward of in order to stay away from the yellow eye. The Pacific Council also was concerned about the longer seasons and the economics that might change for the boat vessels that participate. Our secretariat sent out, I believe, close to 200 questionnaires to the license holders and received an 82, I think it was 82% response asking for some change. And like Peter, I'm very concerned about the interest of those people in the safety aspect of this. So I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, a motion that would have our secretariat engage the Pacific Fishery Management Council, ask them to begin a workshop that would address alternatives to address the safety concerns associated with the current structure of this fishery, while at the same time addressing bycatch issues, the economic viability of the fleet, conflict of interest issues we heard yesterday with the recreational fishery, monitoring, sampling, et cetera. And also to discuss and report back to the commission regarding the roles the IPHC and Pacific Fishery Management Council would have relative to the management of this fishery.
Thanks very much, Bob, for those two motions. I'm going to suggest that we treat them individually in sequence. So on the fixed dates, your motion is that we table that until tomorrow. We've had further chance to discuss the reports that we had from PAG and Conference Board, and we'll make a decision tomorrow. Is there a seconder for that motion from Commissioner Albertson? Peter has seconded that motion. Is anyone opposed? I see no opposition and no further discussion. The motion is passed. On the second piece, dealing with the non-tribal directed commercial fishery, Bob's made a motion. Is there a seconder for that motion? Yeah, we're going to have comments. Do you want to do it now? We'll do it after that. Why don't you second it? Neil has seconded the motion. Is there anyone opposed? No opposition, passes unanimously. Does anyone have a comment on either of the two motions that were just passed unanimously? Neil?
So just on the second piece, I think, I share concerns of other commissioners about the position that I think we find ourselves in, where there are serious safety considerations that we're not comfortable with. But we also recognize that the council is taking steps to try and resolve this. So from my perspective, I really encourage the council to make progress on that work. And I think that I would like to hear back from the council in terms of their progress, with an eye towards resolution of this by the time that we are meeting again next year. And if there is not resolution, I think as a commission, I would hope that we would sort of revisit what kinds of steps could be taken if the council can't sort of make progress to support some of these safety concerns.
Bob?
Speaking to the motion, Mr. Chair, I was anticipating coming to this commission meeting, making a motion for some longer season. I was thinking myself something like 3 days to test something new out. And should we get a response back from the Pacific Council that it may take a couple years to implement some change, I would agree with Neil that we consider that option or some other option that we may to address the safety issue for 2020.
Did you want to modify the motion that we just approved to include that, Bob, or?
Well, I don't think the motion needs to be modified, but as clarification intent of the commissioners, I think
Okay,
that's adequate.
that's great. Thanks very much, Bob and Neil, for bringing that forward. If there's no further discussion on Prop A2, going to move on to Prop A3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So IPHC Secretariat Proposal A3 was actually published with a revision this morning, so many of you may not have seen that, but it's titled Minor Amendments, and these are technical in nature to improve the language that exists in the regulations to make it clearer, make them clearer, and answer questions that we have gotten during the course of the year from stakeholders. So there's a series of them which you can see in the proposal. The other part of the proposal would be to reorder the sequence of these sections of the fishery regulations, again, to make them clearer and easier to use. So that is the minor amendments that we propose.
Thanks very much, Steve. Is there any discussion on Prop A3? Chris?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion on this similar to the one I made for A1, and again with apologies to the Secretariat, recognizing these are intended as technical minor corrections, but not having had a full opportunity to fully assess the implications and parallel processes that we may be required to implement to complement these on our domestic side. I would move to take no action at this time.
Any discussion on the motion? Is there a seconder? Neil seconds the motion. Is anyone opposed? That passes unanimously. If we can move on to Prop B1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So proposal B1 is from the contracting party agency, specifically NOAA Fisheries Alaska Region, and it proposes the charter management measures for IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A. And this is the recommendation from the NOAA Fisheries and North Pacific Fishery Management Council process. And as a reminder for everyone, this is a normal annual process. You get this recommendation now for incorporation into the IPHC regulations. You can adopt this proposal today. The numbers which get filled in are conditional on the TCEY decisions that you make tomorrow. So that as you make decisions on TCEY tomorrow, we will come back and using the method prescribed in the proposal, fill in the numbers which will actually show up in the IPHC regulations.
All right, thanks very much. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners on this particular proposal B1? Not seen any. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Please go ahead.
I recommend that the commission adopt the management measures for charter Pacific halibut fisheries in the IPHC regulatory area 2C and 3A for application in 2019, for 2019 described in proposal B1. In order to achieve the charter Pacific halibut allocation under the council's Pacific halibut catch sharing plan. Pending the outcome of the deliberations on the fishery limits, the commission may adopt the lower limit of the reverse slot limit in area 2C from the measures described in proposal B1. And I'd like to talk to that motion.
Any questions or discussion on the motion? Do we have a seconder? Peter seconds the motion. Is anyone opposed? No opposition. It passes unanimously. If we could move on to the next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are two other stakeholder proposals. Proposal C1 proposes a fixed TCEY value for IPHC regulatory area 2A that would produce an FCEY of 1.5 million pounds.
Thanks, Steve. Any comments or discussion on this particular proposal C1? No. Chris?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this requires a motion, but I guess I would defer action or take no action on this proposal at this time, rather that the issue would be subsumed tomorrow within our discussions and actions on the area by area TCEYs.
Yes, thanks, Chris. I think we do need a motion, and the way you've categorized your statements that would be deferring any action until tomorrow. Is there a seconder on that motion? Neil seconds. Is there anyone that is opposed? I see no opposition, so it passes unanimously. The next is Proposition C2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So stakeholder proposal C2 is proposes a methodology for establishing individual quotas in IPHC regulatory area 2A for the non-tribal directed commercial fishery.
Thank you, Steve. Is there any discussion on this motion? Bob?
So, Mr. Chairman, under the motion I made previously, Proposition A-2, it would be my consideration that IFQ options to the directed 10-hour derby fishery or lengthened seasons or a bycatch fishery would be all part of the workshop that we passed under A2. So I don't think we need to take action on this. I see it as part of the action we took under A2.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Do we need to amend anything, Steve or Dave? Or just that's further direction for the motion we already passed? Okay. So is there anyone opposed? Or do we have a seconder for the motion? Peter? Is anyone opposed to the motion that Bob just tabled? I don't see any, so it passes again unanimously. I think that concludes all the proposals that we've had for regulatory affairs. There is no other business at this point in time for the commission, but I'll just see if there's any commissioners that had anything else that they wanted to discuss or bring forward at this point before we adjourn. Not seeing anything. We are adjourned for the afternoon. I think, Dave, we get together here in the same room again tomorrow morning at 9:30. Is that correct? 9 a.m. tomorrow. Was it 9? We're just 9? Okay, so we are back in this room at 9 a.m. tomorrow for further commissioner discussion and decisions around the outstanding pieces that we just deferred till tomorrow, and also for TCY for regulatory areas as well. So with that, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.